I'm staying with James now. I've already liquidated our retirement accounts. My name is Ethan Marlowe, 46 years old and sitting at my kitchen counter in Boise, watching my wife of 18 years smiling on my phone screen. She panned the camera to show off a diamond bracelet that must have cost thousands. Behind her was a hotel suite I didn't recognize, certainly not her sister's modest apartment in Portland where she was supposedly visiting. "Don't worry," she said, champagne glass tilting dangerously. "You'll land on your feet." I did. I set my phone down and looked around our house. The modern furniture Renee had insisted on buying 2 years ago. The framed photos from vacations where she'd always seemed restless. The expensive kitchen renovation that never quite satisfied her. I'd spent nearly 2 decades building a life with a woman who could record herself laughing while dismantling that same life. The realization didn't hit me like a shock. More like confirmation of something I'd felt in my bones but hadn't wanted to face. As an IT systems consultant, I'd built a career on noticing small inconsistencies. Things that didn't align. Anomalies in data that signaled bigger problems. And for months, I'd been noticing them at home. The weekend trips to see friends that got extended by a day. Credit card charges at restaurants in neighborhoods she never mentioned visiting. Text messages that made her smile in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I picked up my phone again and watched the end of the video. Renee's perfect white teeth, her carefully styled hair, the confidence of someone who believed they'd won. She'd always treated our marriage like a game, but I hadn't known the stakes until now. I typed a simple response. Wise decision. She wouldn't understand what I meant. Not yet. But she would. I walked to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a folder containing bank statements, investment documents, and legal papers I'd gathered over the past 4 months. The evidence of my quiet preparation for exactly this scenario. Renee had always found financial discussions boring. She'd sign whatever I put in front of her, never asking questions beyond whether we were doing okay. It was the one area of our marriage where she'd completely trusted me. That trust was about to become the most expensive mistake of her life. I met Renee when we were both 28. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, all charm and polish, while I managed IT infrastructure for a regional bank. Our courtship was brief, 6 months from first date to wedding day. Everything about her felt electric compared to my methodical nature. "We balance each other," she used to say. "You plan, I live." For years, that balance worked. I built our financial security brick by brick, maxed out retirement accounts, invested in growth stocks that performed well, bought our home when interest rates bottomed out, created spreadsheets tracking every expense. Meanwhile, Renee brought spontaneity. Weekend trips, dinner parties, the social connections that helped me land bigger consulting contracts. The first crack appeared 5 years ago. I found a credit card statement with a $3,000 charge at a jewelry store. It wasn't near my birthday or our anniversary. "It's for my mother," she said when I asked. I nodded and said nothing when her mother visited 3 months later wearing no new jewelry. Then came the late nights at work events, the new clothes, the fitness trainer who texted at odd hours, the weekends away that returned her looking more distant than refreshed. I said nothing. Instead, I began to prepare. When I took on a major consulting contract for CloudFen IT 3 years ago, I created a separate LLC for liability purposes. I restructured our retirement savings. On paper, we had one main account in both our names, but I'd moved 70% of our assets to accounts tied to my business. Accounts Renee had signed off on but never bothered to monitor. 8 months ago, I noticed a pattern of unexplained withdrawals from our joint checking account. Small amounts at first, then larger. When confronted, Renee blamed online shopping. "You work so much," she said. "It helps me feel less lonely." Last month, she began asking questions about our retirement funds, how much we had, how accessible it was, whether I'd updated the beneficiaries. "Just thinking about the future," she said. I watched her scrolling through her phone that night, smiling at something I couldn't see. The diamond tennis bracelet I'd never bought her glinted on her wrist. The pieces were all there. I just hadn't wanted to see the complete picture. So I moved more assets, secured more paperwork, and waited for what I knew was coming. After watching Renee's video a second time, I sat in my home office and felt strangely calm. 18 years reduced to a 40-second clip, and a woman I no longer recognized. I called our bank first. "Mr. Marlowe, we were actually about to contact you," the fraud department representative said. "There's been some unusual activity on your joint retirement account." "I'm aware," I replied. "My wife has attempted to liquidate it without my knowledge or consent. I did not authorize this transaction." The representative's tone shifted from concern to action. "In that case, sir, we need to file a fraud report immediately. I can place a freeze on the account while we investigate." "Please do." By the time I hung up, I'd set in motion what I knew would be the end of my marriage, not the betrayal that had happened long before, but my response to it. I pulled up the document I'd prepared months ago and never hoped to use. Divorce filing papers, partially completed, waiting for details I now had in abundance. I updated the dates, added the latest evidence, and saved the file to send to my lawyer in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Renee. "Did you get my message?" I didn't respond. The freeze on the account would take effect within hours. The fraud investigation would follow, and Renee would discover that her grand exit strategy had a fatal flaw. I walked through our house that night, really seeing it for the first time in years. How little of myself existed in these rooms. The furniture I hadn't chosen, the art that meant nothing to me, the kitchen where I rarely cooked anymore because Renee preferred restaurants. I'd spent nearly 2 decades building a life around a woman who'd been planning to discard me. Every weekend away, every late night, every unexplained purchase, they were steps toward this moment, toward James, whoever he was. In our bedroom, I opened her closet and noted what was missing. The expensive pieces, the favorites. She'd been moving out incrementally for weeks without me noticing. Or perhaps I had noticed but chosen not to see. I slept in the guest room that night, on sheets that didn't smell like her perfume. When I woke up, I felt lighter than I had in years. Over coffee, I emailed the divorce filing to my lawyer with a request for urgency. Then I called Jack, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a case of corporate fraud 2 years earlier. "I need to trace some financial activity," I told him, "and I need it documented for court." I didn't feel anger, not even hurt anymore. Just clarity. Renee had made her choice. Now I would make mine. 3 days after Renee's video message, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, all from her, all with increasing urgency. "What's happening with our account? Why can't I access the funds? The bank is saying something about fraud?" I let them pile up without responding. My lawyer had advised minimal contact, and I was following that advice to the letter. Everything needed to be documented, clean, and by the book. On the 4th day, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Renee standing there, her perfect appearance frayed at the edges. The confident woman from the video was gone, replaced by someone with smudged makeup and wrinkled clothes. "What did you do?" she demanded, pushing past me into the house. I kept my voice level. "I reported unauthorized access to our accounts. The bank froze the funds pending investigation." "Unauthorized?" She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm your wife. I have every right. The account required dual authorization for withdrawals over $10,000. You forged my signature on the paperwork. That's fraud, Renee." Her face changed, the mask slipping to reveal calculation beneath. "You can't prove that." "The bank has the documentation, and I have your video helpfully explaining your intentions." She switched tactics then, moving closer, her voice softening. "Ethan, this is just a misunderstanding. I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly." I stepped back. "You were clear enough to plan this for months. Clear enough to pack your favorite clothes, clear enough to forge documents." "We can work this out," she said, reaching for my arm. "Whatever you think happened with James." "I've filed for divorce," I interrupted. "The papers will be served to you today. This conversation needs to happen through our lawyers. The mask dropped completely. You'd have nothing without me, she hissed. I built your social connections. I made you look successful. You were just some boring IT guy before me. I almost smiled at how predictable this was. And yet, somehow I managed to protect our assets from your attempt to steal them. Imagine that. Her eyes narrowed. The retirement account had over $800,000. It had $180,000, I corrected, which the bank has now frozen. The withdrawal has been flagged as potentially criminal activity. What about the rest? Our portfolio was worth over $1 million. Now I did smile. You never did pay attention during our financial discussions. Understanding dawned slowly on her face. She walked to the kitchen counter and picked up her phone, frantically opening banking apps and entering passwords. Where is it? She demanded. Where's the rest of our money? In accounts you signed the paperwork for but never bothered to monitor. Accounts tied to my LLC which you have no access to without my authorization. The look she gave me then was pure hatred. You planned for this. I shook my head. I protected us from financial risk when I took on the CloudFen contract. Standard business practice. The fact that it also protected our assets from you is just, what would you call it, a wise decision. She threw her phone at the wall. It bounced off harmlessly and clattered to the floor. You think you've won? James has money? He has connections? Then you've landed on your feet, I said, using her own words. But you'll be doing it without the retirement funds you tried to steal, and given the fraud investigation, possibly with a criminal record. She left an hour later, after more threats and several attempts to access my laptop. I changed the locks that afternoon. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a case study in desperation. Renee tried every approach: threats, tears, seduction, legal intimidation. Her lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit, sent demanding letters claiming I had hidden marital assets and engaged in financial misconduct. I forwarded each one to my attorney without comment. Meanwhile, Jack the forensic accountant was uncovering the full picture of Renee's betrayal. She's been siphoning money for almost a year, he told me during our meeting at his downtown office. He slid a folder across his desk. Small withdrawals at first, then larger amounts. Always just under the threshold that would trigger notifications to your phone. I opened the folder to find meticulously documented spreadsheets, credit card statements, cash withdrawals, money transfers. In total, she's diverted approximately $87,000 from your joint accounts, Jack continued. Most of it went to personal expenditures, designer clothing, jewelry, high-end restaurants. I nodded, processing this information with a detachment that surprised even me. But here's where it gets interesting, Jack said, pointing to a highlighted section. About $20,000 went directly to this account. He showed me transfers to an account I didn't recognize, held at a different bank. The account belongs to James Whitaker, 41 years old, works as a regional manager for Voxton Audio, has a history of relationships with wealthy married women. I looked up. You found all this how? Jack smiled thinly. I'm very good at my job, and Mr. Whitaker isn't very good at covering his tracks. This isn't his first rodeo with a soon-to-be ex-wife's finances. Something cold settled in my stomach. Not just betrayal, then. Something calculated, targeted. The timing is what you should note, Jack added. The transfers to Whitaker began 3 months after he was hired at Voxton, the same company where your wife's pharmaceutical sales territory expanded last year. I remembered Renee's excitement about the new client addition, how she'd mentioned the innovative audio technology company expanding into medical device territory, how she'd suddenly needed more evening meetings and weekend conferences. There's more, Jack said, turning a page. Whitaker has done this before, twice that I can document, both times with sales representatives from companies his employer partnered with, both times involving significant financial transfers before a dramatic exit from the marriage. The pieces clicked into place. Not just an affair, then. A predatory pattern. A deliberate targeting of my wife, our finances, our life. Does she know? I asked. Jack shrugged. Hard to say. She might be complicit. Or she might be another victim. Either way, she's been moving your money to him for months. I thought about Renee's confident smile in that video, the new bracelet, the designer bags, the way she'd laughed while telling me she'd emptied our retirement. She knows, I said quietly. Maybe not everything, but enough. Before leaving Jack's office, I had one more question. The account liquidation she attempted. Could Whitaker have coached her through that? Jack nodded. Almost certainly. The paperwork was forged but professionally. And the timing, immediately before a holiday weekend, suggests someone familiar with banking procedures. Someone who knew it might delay fraud detection. I thanked Jack and left with the folder of evidence. On the drive home, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about saving my assets anymore. It was about stopping a predator. And possibly, though I barely admitted it to myself, about saving Renee from her own worst decision. With Jack's evidence in hand, I met with my lawyer, Daniel Green, in his downtown office. The wide windows overlooked the Boise skyline, but I barely noticed the view as we discussed strategy. This changes things significantly, Daniel said, reviewing the documents. We have evidence of systematic financial misconduct, possible conspiracy, definitely fraud. I nodded, watching his experienced eyes scan the numbers Jack had compiled. We have 3 paths forward, he continued. First, we proceed with the divorce as planned, using this to ensure favorable asset division. Second, we file criminal charges against both your wife and this Whitaker individual. Or third, he looked up, meeting my eyes. We use this information as leverage. Leverage for what? To get everything you want in the divorce settlement, and possibly to recover the funds already transferred. I considered this, turning the options over in my mind. What about Whitaker's previous victims? The other women? Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're concerned about them? If he's done this repeatedly, he'll do it again. The pattern matters. My lawyer leaned back in his chair. We could potentially reach out to their attorneys, share information, build a stronger case. I made my decision then. Start with the leverage. Prepare for criminal charges if necessary, and connect with those other attorneys. Within days, we had a coordinated approach. 2 of Whitaker's previous targets had agreed to share their experiences and financial records. The pattern was unmistakable, the predatory nature undeniable. Meanwhile, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I contacted the fraud department at our bank with the complete documentation. They escalated the case immediately, expanding the investigation to include Whitaker and the suspicious transfers. I also reached out to Voxton Audio's corporate compliance officer. An anonymous tip at first suggesting they investigate potential conflicts of interest in their regional management team, just enough to start them looking in the right direction. Then I waited, not passively, but strategically. I monitored account activity. I documented every communication from Renee. I prepared my home by removing anything of sentimental value to me, securing important documents, and changing all passwords. 7 days after my meeting with Daniel, Renee's tone changed abruptly. Her texts shifted from accusatory to concerned. We need to talk. It's important. Please call me back. I think I've made a terrible mistake. There are things about James you should know. I didn't respond, but I forwarded each message to Daniel. 2 days later, Renee appeared at my office building as I was leaving work. She looked shaken, the confident sheen completely gone. He's not who I thought he was, she said, falling into step beside me. James has been lying about everything. I kept walking toward the parking garage. That seems to be going around. I'm serious, Ethan. He's done this before. Used women for their money. I just found out from his ex-girlfriend. I stopped and turned to face her. I know. So does our lawyer. So does the bank's fraud department. So does his employer's compliance team. Her face went pale. You knew? I had a forensic accountant trace every dollar you've transferred to him over the past year. All 87,000 of them. We've connected with his previous victims. We have the complete pattern of behavior documented. She seemed to sway slightly. Ethan, I didn't know. You have to believe me. Actually, I don't have to believe anything you say anymore, Renee. That's the one benefit of all this. I turned and continued walking, leaving her standing in the office plaza as the autumn sun began to set. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. My lawyer had prepared me thoroughly, but nothing could have readied me for the sight of Renee and James sitting together at the respondent's table. She looked diminished somehow. He looked annoyed. They'd arrived together despite the mounting evidence against him, despite everything she now knew. I wondered what hold he still had over her. Our case was called. The judge, an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses, reviewed the documents before her with methodical attention. "Before we proceed," she began, "I understand the plaintiff has submitted additional evidence regarding financial misconduct." Daniel stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have documented systematic fraud, including forged authorization documents and transfer of marital assets to a third party." He presented the comprehensive file we'd assembled, the bank statements, the forged paperwork, the video Renee had sent, admitting to liquidating our retirement accounts, the transfers to Whitaker's personal account, and then the final piece, testimony from Whitaker's previous targets, describing the identical pattern of behavior. I watched Whitaker's face as this evidence was presented. The annoyance shifted to calculation, then to barely concealed panic. When the judge directed her attention to him, he leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney. "Mr. Whitaker," the judge said sharply, "this court has evidence suggesting you may have engaged in a pattern of financial exploitation. While that's not the primary matter before me today, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation." Renee made a small sound beside him. Not quite a gasp. More like the air going out of her last hope. The judge continued, "Given the evidence of financial misconduct, I am freezing all disputed assets pending final resolution. And Mrs. Marlowe, you should be aware that the court takes a very dim view of attempts to hide or transfer marital property." 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new condo in downtown Boise, watching the sunset paint the city gold. The divorce was finalized, the financial matters settled, the legal system had run its course. In the end, Renee had turned on Whitaker, providing evidence that helped the district attorney build a stronger case against him. Whether from self-preservation or genuine remorse, I never asked. The criminal charges against her were reduced in exchange for her cooperation. She avoided jail time but would be making restitution payments for years. Last I heard, she'd moved back to her hometown in Oregon, taking a lower-level sales position with a different company. Whitaker hadn't fared as well. With 3 former victims testifying against him, plus Renee's evidence, he was facing significant time for fraud and financial exploitation. I recovered most of our assets. Not all. Some things once broken can't be made whole again, but enough to rebuild. My consulting business had grown during this time, ironically. Crisis has a way of clarifying priorities. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrea, a project manager I'd been seeing for a few weeks. Smart, straightforward, with her own consulting firm, and a refreshing honesty about what she wanted in life. We were taking things slowly, both carrying our own histories. "Still on for dinner?" her message read. "Looking forward to it," I replied. I went inside to change, passing the single photograph I'd kept from my marriage. Renee and I on our honeymoon, both smiling, both believing in the future we thought we'd share. I didn't keep it out of sentimentality or regret, just as a reminder that trust should be earned continually, not given completely. The retirement accounts were now solely in my name. The passwords changed, the paperwork clear, lesson learned, balance restored.